Yeah, it is time to talk to the legal eagle, Eric Segall. Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us here. If you're watching live, I've got Professor Eric Segall of Georgia State University joining me, and I'm very happy to see you, my friend. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm doing
Are
all
you
right.
cold? Are you cold? Because isn't it like freezing up there?
I'm in upstate New York and at my parents' house, and we have broken the record again. Syracuse, 119 inches of snow this year, the most anywhere.
That's funny because I've talked to friends who are very sad that there's no snow in Colorado and their ski trips are being jeopardized.
Well, just imagine how much Colorado is going to burn. The West is going to burn those states that didn't get. And
Oh,
going to.
interesting you say that. So we just had Lynn has a friend who just visited us from outside of Denver, and they had to do a mock escape thing. They live in a mountain, and if there's a fire, they can't drive down the mountain. So they have these trails they can walk down the mountain. The whole thing sounds nuts and crazy and terrible. But she was really worried about that, Pete. You're right.
Yeah. No, I've friends who have helicopter insurance for a similar issue. Like the helicopter would come in that issue in that instance, and they would come and pick them up.
Yeah, in her house, there's a way to get down the mountain without a helicopter, but it requires walking down basically, a mile.
Well, that's what you get for living on a mountain. 2026.
I agree. It is 65 degrees here in sunny.
Well, you're in Atlanta. I'm in just outside Syracuse, where there's a huge lake effect storm. I'm looking out my childhood window, and the snow is just blowing sideways. I love it. It's beautiful. I don't mind.
You posted a picture on social media somewhere that, to me, someone who was born in Montreal, raised in New York, but spent the last 40 years in the South, looked to me like Siberia. Basically, you could be living in Siberia. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's similar to it, and I love it.
I was actually worried you'd been kidnapped by the Russians. I was a little worried about that.
I wish. Okay, it would help my career. All right, lots to talk with you about. First of all, what was your reaction to our Attorney General's performance yesterday? Have you ever seen anything like it? Is it comparable to anything in history, the history of attorneys general?
So, quick reminder, and maybe to your new audience, I worked for the Department of Justice from 1987 to 1991 under the first George Bush. It was really a great experience, and I loved every second of it. A couple times I said we shouldn't bring cases, and the political people agreed, which was one of the great highlights of my life, to be honest, because those cases would have done immense damage. The Department of Justice is something that I'm proud that I did, and used to be, I think, a very good institution in America. Take away the Nixon years, maybe a couple of the Reagan years, and now the Trump years. But I do have a loyalty to that institution, which is now gone. And one of the clearest signs that it's gone is our Attorney General. Pete, I can't decide. So if you haven't watched it, you should, as much as one can tolerate, because it is one of the worst public performances I've ever seen, given the issue, which was raping, trafficking, molesting teenage girls. You would think if there was ever a moment in time where this woman would show some sensitivity, some grace, some regret, something. The survivors were in the fucking, can I say fuckingness? Fucking room. And so my question is, Pete, I'm asking you this because you are an observer of these kind of things. Was it performative, or is this who she really is?
Well, I think it was definitely performative. I think it's always performative, I would say. But I don't know enough. But her being AG at Florida, always being around this case, the only thing I can imagine at this point, given everything that's come out, is that she somehow has implicated herself. And that's basically what Thomas Massey was saying, is like the fact that she's part of a cover-up is the only reason why she would just go full hilt to the tilt and behave the way she did, because she's protecting herself. It's not that she's a sycophant of Trump's and that she's got to say, oh, he's the greatest. I think she's potentially in harm, legally in harm's way for what she might be.
But to be clear, we have no evidence of that yet.
We don't. No, we don't. But I mean, she's been in and around Florida and around Trump, and there's a lot of smoke there. So there's no evidence that I don't think that she's. But to some extent, you could argue that there's evidence that she's part of a cover-up. It would seem that there's starting to be evidence. The redacted files are redacted. Like, what is going on?
There's definitely a cover-up. That's not a question. I don't know if that means she was, involved earlier. But there's definitely a cover-up. I have a more important question. Did you just say hilt to the tilt?
I didn't mean to. And when it came out, I felt like such a douche. And I feel even worse now of all people for you to call me on it. Feels righteous.
Why me of all people? I don't use phrases in the 1950s or never. Wherever that phrase came, whenever that
phrase has ever been used anywhere, and that's why I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't think it's going to catch on. I think longtime listeners will glom on to you making fun of me, and at our hangout tonight, they'll probably like, is this hangout going to be?
I will be bitterly disappointed if no one calls you out on Hill.
I will be too. All right.
Okay. Sorry. I should have waited for that, because this is a deadly serious topic for a number of reasons. One, the underlying Pete, this whole Epstein thing, I keep like every day brings me to new lows in thinking about this, because I am looking at people who are talking about the files and going through the files. If you had asked me 3 years ago, I really underestimated the extent of the awfulness of this thing. I mean, it's Bill Gates. I mean, there was just it is so far flung and so.
Can I just say that a lot of people are saying that, and I don't know what's surprising about the wealthiest people in the world thinking they can get away with anything, and because they're under a lot, a watchful eye a lot, it's hard maybe for them to, have affairs or illegal sexual, so they find someone they can trust. And,
I would have thought, yes,
I'm not surprised by that wealthy men think that they can get away with anything, because they do most of their lives.
So fair point. And I have often talked on your show about the kind of oddity of Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, a whole bunch of other people, famous celebrities who have affairs or whatever, and all. But this is different. None of that's illegal. I mean, what Bill Clinton did wasn't per se illegal, but it was hopelessly wrong. Don't have sex with an intern if you're the president. I think he should have resigned. But this is different. This is teenage girls. This is statutory rape. This is trafficking. I would have thought, like Bill Gates. Let's take Bill Gates, who allegedly, isn't. I don't know if he is or not, but allegedly he has some involvement here. The idea that he would do something this horrific, given his public status, is a hubris I can't even begin.
That's because you're not them.
And I'm not saying he did. By the way, let me be clear. I'm not saying Bill Gates did anything illegal.
He definitely did something. His wife is even saying it. But I think that's the hubris you can't imagine, because you've never. It's hard for someone with your kind of moral clarity and your principled person. But again, that kind of money gets you out of all crimes, all bad things.
I guess so. It's just so depressing. So that's the one thing. But the second thing is between Patel and her, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and her, their appearances before Congress. What they have done is they have replicated not Donald Trump's style, but Roy Cohn's style. This was originally Roy Cohn. Just for your audience, he was a famous Joseph McCarthy right-hand man who was a big part of the whole communist horribleness of the 1950s. And Roy Cohn was Donald Trump's mentor until he got AIDS, and then Trump left him, flat. And Roy Cohn told Donald Trump, and Trump himself has said this in Trump's words, never apologize, always hit back 10 times harder than you're hit, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what these people are doing. And I thought one of the Congress people, I don't remember who it was, made a good point when she said, I'm not going to ask this witness any questions, because she's not answering any questions.
Jasmine Crockett.
She's just taking the questions and then going on irrelevant, non sequitur speeches about how much she loves the president, how much good the president has done. Bill Barr, who, by the way, Bill Barr's father, it turns out, gave Jeffrey Epstein his first real job, apparently. I didn't know that until recently. I worked for Bill Barr, indirectly. I worked for Bill Barr at the same time he was Attorney General. No one thinks low. I worked on Iran-Contra, as I think your audience knows me. No one thinks lower of Bill Barr than I do. No one. But I wrote that. I've written that up several times. But the idea that his father was involved with Epstein, and then Barr comes in and whitewashes everything when he's the whole thing is just it's even by Trump standards, it's unbelievable. Even by Roy Cohn standards, can't Kash Patel and Biondi first say this is terrible? What has happened to these survivors and these?
Well, they couldn't. You already mentioned it, but that photograph or that image of all the victims behind her and she wouldn't turn around. That picture it screams at you. And I think it matters. I think the optics of that yesterday
I hope so.
are not lost on people, but we don't have to speculate about how it was perceived. Let me get back to, the legality of all. Let me ask you another DOJ question though. And this did it come up yesterday or not, but it certainly came up in the news in that a grand jury failed to indict these 6 Democrats who are all veterans who made that video saying don't follow unlawful orders. Right. And that in company with all of the federal, the attorneys, Alina Habba,
the U.S. attorney nonsense,
and Jeanine Pirro, they keep failing to get indictments. Prosecutors don't generally fail to get grand juries to give them the indictments because they generally bring cases where there's evidence, or else they wouldn't bring it. You can indict a ham sandwich and all that. But how big of a deal was it that this grand jury and these other grand juries, as well as these other federal judges, are saying to these district attorneys, you can't even be here. You're not even qualified to be trying this case. It seems like the federal courts are doing pretty good work.
The lower federal courts are doing great work. They really are. Even some Trump judges, although it turns out. So it turns out that lower federal court Trump judges rule against him. I don't remember what it was, but a reasonable amount of time. Appellate judges appointed by Trump have ruled in favor of Trump 92% of the time. Appellate judges in the Supreme Court are doing a terrible job. But district court judges, trial court judges are doing a great job. That grand jury thing, Pete, is really interesting because it is true. The cliche is a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. Remember, the prosecutor goes to the grand jury. There's no other side. The prosecutor goes in by him or herself, presents the case, and really can convince grand juries of almost anything. So when they fail to do so, that is important. It's also something that's, it's important and traditionally kind of good about America, which is there are times when grand juries, it's rare, do step up. And this is one of those times. You said Jeanine Pirro, that's Judge Jeannie, right? Or whatever.
Jeanine Pirro.
Yeah. The idea that she is in a position of power in this administration is, I don't know what to say.
Well, so many other people, including those that named in the Epstein files. I mean, there's so many unqualified people, and luckily, because they're terrible at doing their job, they're not actually able to carry out the political prosecutions of people like Letitia James and James Comey because they're not good at their job.
So I worked at the DOJ, for like a minute or two under Reagan, and then for most of my career under Bush. And of course, during those days, the Department of Justice had a very clear agenda: anti-affirmative action, anti-abortion, a bunch of other things. But the people who worked there, I can't believe I'm going to say this. This is how far we've dropped. Like even like the Bill Barr types, even those people thought the Department of Justice stood for something important. Important in ways you and I would agree with. As I said, there were 2 pretty big cases that I talked to. I was a lowly trial attorney. I talked people who were confirmed by the Senate into not bringing those cases for various reasons. And the reason they didn't is because they took some pride in what the Department of Justice stood for. Kash Patel and Biondi and all the people who work very closely with them have no pride in the institution that they are running. And I think they would admit. I think they would almost admit that they don't trust the government. This, that, and the other thing. It's really terrible, and it may do permanent damage. I hope not, but it may do permanent damage.
What do you make of? Well, there's a couple of things coming up, I guess, that we can talk about. Yeah. There hasn't been any major arguments in front of the Supreme Court, and
no, because they work so hard that they've been off for like this is an institution that starts its official work the first Monday in October, ends on June 30th. So that's July. That's 3 months off. Now, it's not like NBA players or teachers who actually work when their time is off. The justices do a little bit of work when they're off, but not really. They're so busy. They have 4 law clerks. They decide total about 75 cases on the merits a year, which means each judge writes about 10 opinions. Lower court judges write 10 opinions in a month, maybe even a couple of weeks sometimes. They're so busy that they've been out for like a month, but they come back soon, and there are some big cases coming up, obviously.
What do you want to mention coming up? And
well, I think I've been writing today, and this will be on my blog next week, about a case called U.S. versus Hermari, which is the second big gun case this term. The first big, did we talk about the first big gun case last time I was here?
I think so, but I forget everything. I suck.
Me too. I'm seeing now about the Hawaii. But let's talk about this case because it's really kind of an interesting case. Federal law prohibits people who are drug addicts or unlawful users of drugs from possessing guns. Now, in the case of drug addicts, we can have that conversation. That's not this case. This case involves a pretty bad guy, but he is charged with owning a gun, and he admits that he smokes marijuana basically every other day. And the question is, and he was convicted, and then the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, otherwise known as the Fifth Circuit Court of Gun Rights, reversed the conviction, saying that you can't lose a constitutional right like owning a gun because you use marijuana every other day. They said you have to be, you can't. The law prohibits you from owning owning a gun while having a gun in your possession while you are high. But just using drugs and having a gun at other times, they say, is a violation of the Second Amendment. The court is going to, this is, by the way, the same statute that Hunter Biden was convicted under. This is the very same law that Hunter Biden was convicted under, owning a gun while being a drug addict. But this guy is not a drug addict. Anyway, the case is going to be argued on March 2nd. And what's interesting about it is most of the experts that I read when it comes to gun rights and gun and Second Amendment agree, as do I, this shouldn't be a Second Amendment case at all. This should not be really a gun rights case at all. I don't know what using drugs unlawfully means. And neither does the federal government. At first, they defined it as, hello, Pete, we're not on anymore.
Your call has been.
I don't know if I'm live, but Pete is gone. I hope New York hasn't been nuked or something. Well, this is very interesting. I have texted Pete to ask him if he is alive. I have asked him if New York has been nuked. I'm hoping the answer is yes. Answers are yes and no to those questions. This seems to say I'm live and still going on, but Pete is gone. I guess I'm going to try to leave the show and come back. Is that a good idea? I don't know. I don't know anything about technology. I guess we'll try it. No, I think I'll stay.
I think I'm back.
You're back. What happened? I was worried New York was nuked there for a second or something.
New York? You thought New York got nuked?
P, was I live that entire time?
Yes, just awkwardly sitting there.
No, I was talking to your audience actually.
Oh, good.
No, just a little, just a little bit, just a little.
I'm so sorry to everybody watching. We lost power here, and
see, too much snow, Siberia, that whole thing.
Maybe, yeah. So sorry about that, but I am. I don't know if you finished that. If we can jump back into what you're talking about.
I did. Let's start over again. How's that?
Yeah.
Frankly, I wasn't doing a very good job.
The gun case with drugs. Am I in trouble? I don't have a gun, but I do drugs.
Federal law prohibits.
Maybe I have a gun. Maybe I have a bunch of guns. Actually, I don't
know. That makes me nervous. Okay. Federal law prohibits you from owning a gun if you are a drug addict or an habitual drug. I'm sorry, or a unlawful user of drugs. That phrase, unlawful user of drugs, is not defined anywhere in the statute. Drug addict is, and no one is arguing about the drug addict part of this case. This case only applies to unlawful user of drugs. The defendant was convicted of he admitted that he smoked marijuana every other day, give or take. And the FBI found, pursuant to a warrant, a gun in his house. So he's being convicted as being an unlawful user of drugs and owning unlawful user of drugs and owning a gun at the same time. So this is a big Second Amendment case, except it shouldn't be a Second Amendment case because this federal statute does not give enough notice to the public what is legal and what is not. At one time, the federal government said, if you use drugs even once a year, then you're an unlawful user of drugs and you can be convicted under the statute. But they said that at a time when the Second Amendment wasn't a big deal, and we didn't really have the gun rights we have today. So in this case, the Trump administration, who is defending this conviction, which is kind of surprising a little bit, but the Trump administration that's defending this, given the NRA, and my dogs enter the room, hope they don't bother anybody. The Trump administration is saying that what they really mean is habitual users of drugs. That if you're an habitual user of drugs, then you can't own a gun. What does that mean? Twice a week, 4 times a week, once a month, 3 times a month? Is an habitual user of marijuana the same as an habitual user of heroin? I wouldn't think so, right? I mean, there's different things going on there. So what the court should do with this case, and this is, by the way, what the ACLU says, what my colleague Andrew Willinger says, and he used to run Duke's Center for Firearms, which is one of the best centers in the country. He's a firearms expert. And what many people are saying, including me, is the court should not talk about the Second Amendment at all, really, and just say this law that makes it a crime to own a gun if you're an unlawful user of drugs needs to be defined better for by Congress, or maybe by the president, but it needs to be defined in a way that gives people notice of what's legal and what's not. Being an habitual user without any further definition doesn't tell us anything. It really doesn't. My fear is that in the Roberts Court's desire to arm the Second Amendment with as much oomph as it possibly can, that it's going to decide this case under the Second Amendment when there is a 200-year-old doctrine that the court quotes a lot that says when you can decide a case on non-constitutional grounds or constitutional grounds, decide it on non-constitutional grounds. Because if they decide it that way, Congress can fix it, Congress can change it, and it's a less impactful decision. And the court likes to say we're not going to decide constitutional questions unless we absolutely have to. I agree with the ACLU that this law as applied to this defendant should not lead to a conviction because I have no idea what an habitual drug user is.
Well, that's great. But also the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about drug use.
Well, no, it doesn't. So under the court's Bruin test, which is the test I called insane, and I stand by that, policy concerns are irrelevant to the court reviewing the case. Now, that's insane. That's insane. We've talked about that before. All you can say is, was there a similar law at the founding or maybe in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was passed? That's an insane test. It applies no place else in constitutional law. There are obviously serious policy considerations at stake in this case. I don't think people who routinely use heroin should have guns. I don't. Do you? I just don't.
I don't think people who drink alcohol routinely. I'm way more worried about alcohol than any other drug.
Right. So, in fact, it turns out that at the founding, a lot of states and towns and cities made it illegal to own a gun if you were, quote, a drunkard, drunkard, a drunkard. There were no drug laws back then, but there were laws about alcohol for the reasons you're saying. And so the government is arguing this is just like that. But the defendant is saying, yes, those laws existed. We agree. They can't deny it. But drunkards they used the word drunkard to mean alcoholic, to mean an addict, basically.
It's hilarious.
They didn't mean, alcohol use 2-3 times a week. Otherwise, the entire founding population, or most of them,
Right.
other than some people, wouldn't be able to own guns. The point I really want to make to your audience is this should not be a Second Amendment case. This should be a what did Congress mean case. We don't know until we make that very clear so that people know what's legal and what's not legal. This law can't be applied to this defendant, and frankly, probably shouldn't have been applied to Hunter Biden because of the uncertainties.
Right. That's
but I don't know enough about that case, to be honest, to say that's a big case coming up.
That's a big case coming up. We'll talk about another.
And we also have, by the way, birthright citizenship coming up. Pete, you went mute. You're mute. I cannot hear you.
How about now?
Now I can't. See, it's the snow. See, 65 degrees and sunny is better. Yeah. I can hear you now.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
The SAVE Act.
The
SAVE Act and voter.
Yeah. I've been really busy with a lot of things, but by the way, next time we're on the air, I will.
Let me just ask you the question. You don't need to know about the legislation at all. My question is, what do you say to people, and we've had this argument many times before, but it's worth reminding folks, who make an argument that you need an ID to buy alcohol. You need an ID to drive a car. Why is it so much to ask someone have an ID to vote? And just to be clear, you need to know history. You need to know about the Voting Rights Act. You need to know how things work. But more importantly, just specifically this idea that they're coming up with these ideas and schemes because they're saying that our elections are filled with fraud, which they aren't. They're the most secure in the world. And more importantly, they're saying that undocumented people vote in these elections, which is also not true. And there's no proof of it. But more importantly, you have to be really stupid to believe that, because to register to vote, of course, you need an ID. When you go and vote, you don't have to have an ID. But no, like Latino guys going and showing up and be like, "Hi, my name is Giuseppe Antonucci, and I would like to vote." Like this, it just doesn't happen. It wouldn't happen. It's not a crime that anybody would commit. But what do you say? What's you think the most effective argument against needing an ID to go and vote?
I have two answers to you. First, do you think there are a lot of Latin people named Giuseppe?
No, but my point was like an Asian guy walks in and says, he's Chinese, and he says, "My name is, Mary," a female. You couldn't. It doesn't happen. Why would you do that?
So here's my take on this. Let's forget my take. Let's talk about some experts' take who really have studied. I know a lot about this issue, but there are experts who know more. There was a time, for example, when a lot of people thought we should have national ID cards. Most countries, many democracies have national ID cards. You just, it's kind of like your social security card, except it's a card you carry in your wallet at all times with your picture on it that shows you're a citizen of the United States. In countries that have national ID cards, this isn't an issue. You show your national ID card, which everybody carries, like they carry driver's licenses, and you vote. We don't have that. And 20 years ago, people thought that was a bad idea. Now we're all afraid of national ID cards because of the privacy and the AI and the way that it can be technologized against us. But so we don't have a uniform national photo identification. Because of that, Pete, there are literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not probably millions of poor, elderly people who are American citizens, have the right to vote, and live very far away from any major metropolitan area, and who have not had a valid driver's license for years because they're 77 years old or 92 years old or whatever, and haven't driven in a very long time. For those people to get the kind of ID these states want them to get is really burdensome, can be really burdensome, really expensive. And I hear these Republicans all the time yelling, "What's so hard about getting an ID?" Well, if you have money and you live near a city, even if you're poor, it's not that burdensome. But in rural Texas, in rural Wyoming, even rural New York, not far from where you live, 80 miles probably from where you live, 100. It could be very, very, very difficult. And there's no reason to require it because, so my wife teaches in the business school at Gozueta, and she teaches problem solving at Emory University. She teaches problem solving. And the number one rule of solving problems, whether it's a podcast, Exxon, or the President of the United States, or legislatures, is what problem are we fixing? What is the problem we're trying to fix? Until you ask that question, any solution is ridiculous. What problem are we solving? There is zero evidence of in-person voter fraud. There is some evidence of fraud by mail, but in-person voter fraud? No. When I go to vote in Georgia, and my understanding is this is even more true in rural Georgia, not Atlanta, there's all kinds of safety things. You can't just walk in and vote. You have to be on the rolls, at which point you're right, you needed some kind of ID before that. People are not committing fraud with in-person voting, and there's no evidence. So what problem are we fixing by having ID? None. What problems are we causing? A tremendous problem for the elderly and the poor, both in rural America. And that's tens of millions of people, probably. How's that?
It's great. I mean, I fully agree. But, people are saying, well, they do it in the rest of the world. Why not here?
Yeah. Well, and in most of the countries where they do it, I think there are national ID cards that people carry around with them. And that would be easy.
By the way, if you want to adopt other countries' voting policies, if you want to make that argument that, other countries do it, well, then why don't we have Election Day as a holiday? And why don't we make it compulsory? Make people vote. And why aren't people automatically registered when they get their license? There's a whole bunch of ideas that would create more democracy, but these same people don't want that. And all these people in the chat or anybody else watching, they don't care about making voting easy. They want to make voting hard and they specifically want to make voting hard for people who are likely to vote for Democrats. This has always been a conservative movement thing to make voting hard for likely Democrat voters, black and brown folks, college folks, young people. They want to make it harder so that they can win. It's a way to rig the election against Democrats.
Texas specifically said, I think, a while back, that a college student ID, even at a state college, University of Texas, is not a proper ID. That's your picture on it, says you go to the University of Texas or wherever, is not a proper ID. And that was done for one reason and one reason only: to stop college kids from voting, because college kids at the time, at least, voted more Democrat than Republican. This is every time there's been a vote in the legislature to require voter ID, it is almost always 100% Republican and 0% Democrat, to which my Republican friends sometimes say, well, that just shows the Democrats don't want voter ID because they want to, for partisan reasons as well. Well, maybe. I'm not denying, maybe that's true. But my point there is we should all want people to vote easier, just like you just said. And well-meaning politicians in both political parties should make it as easy as possible to vote for everybody, which is what most functioning democracies do anyway. This national ID thing, Pete, is kind of interesting to me. My friend Rick Hasen, who's a leading election law scholar, is now, I believe, against this because of the concerns of government intrusion into other parts of our lives if they give us a government-issued, national ID card. But it seems like, given the events of the last 2 years with ICE and everything else, maybe once, along with your social security card, if you have proof that you're an American citizen, you should get a national ID card. So that which you can put on your phone. So when ICE stops you and you have a phone, or even in your wallet or your back pocket, you can show this thing that shows you're an American, because no one carries their passport around. It's too valuable and all that. Also, a national ID card would be a very central database for the government to use right away. Is this person a citizen? No, he's not. Yes, he is. But I understand why people are a little bit concerned in these days about that kind of thing. But make no mistake, this all started in the 1990s because Republicans didn't want people of color and rural old people to vote, because those people vote Democrat more than Republican.
Why should voting be easy?
So in my class, I'm going to get to that. I'll answer that question in a way that might surprise some of your audience. In my class, I often have what I call a devil's advocate conversation, or I say I'm not necessarily saying this is my view, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. Why should we have universal suffrage? If someone is functionally illiterate, now let's leave aside America's tortured history of using literacy tests to stop Black people from voting, an historical fact that can't be denied. White people were not stopped from voting if they couldn't read, but Black people were. Let's just be clear. But assuming we can get away from all of that and have a non-racially tainted system where you have to simply read 2 sentences of very big letters in any language, Spanish, English, whatever, before you vote. You have to be literate at a 5th grade level, let's say, to vote. I say, what's wrong with that? Do we really want people voting who can't read? Now, in 1995, when I had that argument, we had one set of arguments, of conversations. When I make that argument today, most of the people in my class go, yeah, but no one needs to read today. Listen, podcasts, TV, cable news, whatever it is, you can get your information elsewhere. To which I respond, well, maybe, but still making literacy, I'm talking about 5th grade literacy, 3rd grade literacy, a test for voting strikes me as something that might improve the franchise. To which the answer comes back, and this convinces me and most of my class usually, that's not why we let people vote. We let people vote not because they're going to do the right thing, because they need to participate in the functioning of their government to breed intergenerational loyalty to the United States of America. And if you're disenfranchised from voting, this is true for voter ID as well, you will have lesser stake in the government. And the last time I looked at it, our fundamental document starts with "we the people." And I know they just meant white male property owners, but today I would hope "we the people" means all the people who are citizens of America. And thus all the people who are citizens of America should have the right to vote.
Let me ask you about the other case that is coming, the other argument. You mentioned the guns and drugs case. What is the other big case coming down?
Well, there's a bunch. I mean, we've already had a bunch, but I think the one that most people are interested in probably is birthright citizenship. I mean, there have been a lot of really important cases that have already been argued, like the tariffs case and other cases. But we still haven't had argument in the birthright citizenship case. And that's coming. And this is the one, Pete, that really makes my heart and brain ache as much as Pam Biondi's ridiculous and horrible performance in front of Congress yesterday, because so everybody is predicting the court is going to maintain the current system, which is, of course, if you're born in America, you're an American citizen, unless you're the child of a diplomat, because then you don't you owe allegiance to your parents' country, not this country, or you're part of an invading army of some. Obviously, if you're an invading army in America, their children shouldn't be American citizens. Those are the two, and some Native American tribes who have their own sovereignty, on their tribes. But other than those exceptions, everyone born in America has been an American citizen since the 14th Amendment was passed. It basically says that. And this has been, almost, there have been a couple exceptions, but 99.5% of all scholars who have looked at this until recently, now it's about 98%, have said, of course, if you're born in America, subject to those minor exceptions, you're an American citizen. Most people are predicting the court is going to invalidate Trump's executive order, which says, you're not an American citizen if you're born to non-American citizens visiting America for a short period of time. Everybody that I know also predicted the Trump immunity case would come out differently than it came out. And everybody was wrong about that case. I don't think they're going to be, including myself, I don't think we're going to be wrong about this case, but I'm not sure anymore with the Roberts court. It's hard to know. Pete, if it turns out that they can make people born in America not American citizens because their parents were visiting here, the Trump executive order does not make that retroactive. It only applies in the future. But that wouldn't stop the Trump administration from passing a new executive order or Congress passing a statute saying it's retroactive, such that people who have been citizens for 50 years, 30 years, 80 years are no longer citizens of America because their parents.
Thanks.
The whole thing is an absolute nightmare. There's a federal law that I think pretty much forget the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. There's a federal law that says this. And Trump's executive order is a distortion, I think, of that federal law. This is another case the court doesn't really have to decide on constitutional grounds. The court could say there's a federal statute that gives these people citizenship, and the president can't change that, by executive fiat. Executive fiat is the term for the new administration. They do everything by executive fiat, not executive order. They don't go through notice and comment. They just issue. He just says something, and all of a sudden they think it's law. I will say this. If the Supreme Court were to uphold the Trump administration's executive order in this case, I do believe the pushback against the court would finally be the kind of pushback I've been advocating for since a long time, for 35 years, since you and I started talking, because there is no legal basis. There just isn't. The legal arguments that have been marshaled by a few conservative legal scholars are frivolous. There are a ton of conservative legal scholars, who say this case should come out the correct way. It's an argument that until recently was off the wall, literally off the wall, insane. And if the court buys it, I think that will do permanent and ever. I never say this. I didn't say this about Bush versus Gore. I didn't say it about the Obamacare case. I didn't say it about the Trump immunity case. But I am saying it about this case. If the court upholds the Trump administration executive order, I think the Supreme Court is basically dead as an institution in American life. I do. I really do.
Very, very interesting and important, and that will be argued soon. It'll be interesting. Yes, we'll know during the arguments how they.
I think so. We didn't used to. There was a time, of course, we couldn't listen to the arguments until recently, but there was a time when the court, Justice Kennedy did this a lot. Maybe even Scalia did this at the beginning of his career, and before that, they all did it. There was a time when the justices would ask the lawyers questions that would. So that were hard for the justice wanted to reach result A, but they were worried about things. So they would ask questions about that wasn't in their interest to ask. That's done. What we have now is the conservatives asking questions that make the public think the conservatives should win, and the liberals ask questions most of the time make the public think the liberals should win. And that's the very worst way to have an argument. I can tell. I've been doing this kind of thing for 35 years, Pete, at every level. At mock trial level, in real life. Judges should make sure that how they're leaning is correct. And the best way to do that is to hear the best arguments on the other side. I sometimes have personal issues, with kids or whatever, friends, whatever, job. And I'll say to my closest friends, I've said this to you, I think, tell me why I'm wrong. I really want to know, make the strongest argument you can that I'm wrong. That's what the justices should do. And they used to do that some. They don't do it anymore. So yeah, we should know. There are very few surprises anymore.
A lot of other things I want to ask you about, but time is up, I guess. What else is on your mind that you've been paying attention to, though? Anything else that you want to mention before we leave?
Yes, I am unbelievably concerned about, like everybody else, about the midterm elections. There's a scholar at Princeton, Kim Sheppel. She is one of the leading experts in the world on Austria and the rise of Hungary and just the rise of totalitarian movements, in the world. And Dahlia Lithwick, your friend, my friend, interviewed her in January of 2025. And just a few weeks ago, Dahlia replayed that interview, which is not something Dahlia usually does. She has enough original content. She doesn't have to do that. But she replayed that because everything Kim said was going to happen has happened, just faster than Kim said it was going to happen. And I don't see any world where the Trump administration allows for the possibility of the House of Representatives going Democrat. I think they will use every tactic possible to stop that. I think that's the ultimate. I think ICE will be around blue cities and will be there to intimidate people of color from voting. I mean, this whole thing that's happened in Georgia, where this magistrate let the FBI raid the voting, the official voting offices of the state of Georgia based on election denial idiocy, is a terrible sign. And I think the only way to stop this, Pete, is mass universal protest. And maybe that'll happen, but I'm not sure. So I am unbelievably concerned about the midterms. And I think I think there's only. I'm. This is going to sound really pessimistic, but I am Dr. Doom and Gloom or Professor Doom and Gloom. Either there will be unfair elections or there'll be violence. I don't really see another way.
What about the fact that the elections are unfair, but that so many people come out and vote? They are overwhelmingly Democrats win everywhere.
I do not believe the Trump administration will likely let that happen.
I think it's not. How is it up to them? It's up to the states. What are they going to
do? Well, hold on.
States are going to elect people, and then they're going to send those people to Washington.
Well, first of all, remember, we're only talking about a few states, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, really. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but
where you think they would be
90-something% of incumbents win, right? Something like that. So, I mean, there's only
not this election, not in this upcoming midterm
election. Traditionally, yes. Yes. In American history, the number is over 90%, I think. So only they don't have to worry about all the elections. They just have to worry about a few, in comparison, contested elections.
Are you talking about the midterm elections, the congressional elections, where Democrats will take over and
yes. So if the House of Representatives goes Democrat, everything changes unless the Trump administration is willing to use force, against the House of Representatives, which maybe it will, but they're not going to. There's nothing in Donald Trump's history that suggests he's going to let that happen, other than losing the 2020 election, and he incited a violent coup.
He didn't stop
that.
Yeah, no, so, I don't think it's at all irrational or even necessarily unlikely. I'm just not.
That's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about. The Supreme Court is small potatoes to me compared to that. I think that is if the bulk of the American people, a very small percentage, I mean, I know a large percentage of Republicans who voted, but the number of Americans who think the 2020 election was stolen is actually pretty small compared to everybody in America. I think this election might be different, and it's not good to underestimate Donald Trump. We have learned that over and over and over and over and over.
Right. Yeah.
And he is saying the one thing about Donald Trump. I have a friend who's probably 3 standard to the deviations left of even you and me. Like, he's always been really, really far left. The one thing he says about Trump, and he hates Trump as much as we do, but the one thing he says is Trump does tell us what he's going to do and what he's done most of the time. Like, he's a liar, obviously, about numbers and statistics and data. He's not a liar about his plans, right? I mean, he tells us what he's going to do. And he's already told us the only way the Democrats can win is by cheating. He said that. He says it all the time. The only way the House can go Democrat is if Democrats cheat. And therefore, in his brain, he can do anything he wants to make sure it's already done. He's already won the election. He just has to make sure the Democrats don't cheat, which is a bizarre, perverse, insane, lunatic way of looking at the election. But that is what he says, and it is how he feels. So I think they're going to put a tremendous amount of thinking, energy, and time into making sure that midterm elections in November don't end up.
The reason they'll fail is because the reason they fail at almost everything. They're bad at it. They're bad.
They're not failing at everything. They're deporting.
They're failing at not at everything, but at so many things. They failed with Jimmy Kimmel. They failed with Don Lemon. They failed in Minneapolis.
They haven't failed Don Lemon yet.
Yes, they have. They failed. They absolutely failed Don Lemon. They're not going to be able to prosecute him. And more importantly, what they did was they made him more popular. They tried to silence him. They tried to silence Kimmel, made them more popular. So these efforts backfire. Not only that, they failed at the gerrymandering scheme. That was a really scary thing what they tried to do, started in Texas. Now it looks like they're going to lose those seats in Texas as well. They keep failing with these strategies because they're so bad at governance and they're so bad at carrying out these illegal strategies. They couldn't indict any of those 6 veterans who spoke out to say don't take an unlawful order. They couldn't even do that, as we talked about at the beginning. So I think they will continue to fail, and I think that Democrats are going to come out overwhelmingly, and Republicans as well, and vote in numbers that they can't cheat to win. That's the way
I hope you're right. I also hope, on a much larger basis, that more and more Republicans, and the Epstein stuff is already causing some of this. That look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, among others. That more Republicans will realize that this man shouldn't be president.
Yeah,
shouldn't be in power.
A lot can change between me and now and November. A lot more can come out for sure.
Yes.
A lot more mistakes can be made, and that's all he.
But again, so Donald Trump, I think, is physically incapable of accepting loss. I mean, he loses all the time. All his companies are bankrupt. But then
he accepted the midterm loss in 2018. He accepted.
That was very different. That was a very different.
He was impeached for it.
That was a very different time.
And
because of the immunity decision. That was a very different time. And the people in power in 2018 were people like, I don't know if Bill Barr was in power that day, but there were people like, they were traditional 1990s Republicans. Right. None of those people are in power now. Now we only have MAGA in power. And that is why, I mean, Pete, I believe the official position of the executive branch today is they don't need a judicial warrant to go into people's houses to see if you're, here illegally. That's just not the law. I mean, that's just insane. But that's their position, among other things. They don't care anymore about anything other than the first term. Trump's people cared about things other than Donald Trump.
Right.
That's not true anymore. So I don't know.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of your expertise and time today. I appreciate everybody watching live, and I can't thank you enough, Eric Segall. Go buy his books. Go follow him on Blue Sky, especially, and we will talk.
And as a tease for next time, next time I have some personal news to share. That's kind of fun. So
yes, I'm looking forward to sharing that publicly. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Talk to you everybody soon. Thank you for watching. If you're a paid subscriber, I'm hosting a hangout tonight, so stop by at 8 p.m. See you there. Bye, everybody.